Okay. In the name of the Father, the Son, the Holy Spirit, one God, amen. So we're going to continue the Screw Tape Letters, the audio book that I was playing today. We're going to talk about letter 2. So I thought we'd start at the beginning and just kind of work our way up. Unfortunately, we did letter 8 and letter 9 already. They're not really in order per se. Each one's kind of its own little independent thing. And so letter 2 is about the church. And so I'll start playing and you guys can hear. So like I told you before, Uncle Screwtape, the senior demon, is training the junior demon on how to trick humans. So again, everything is reversed. When he says our patient, the patient is the person who the demon is trying to take to hell. Okay, so every person is assigned a demon. Okay, and that demon's job is to tempt you. And when he says, when the demons are saying our Father's kingdom, they're talking about Satan, okay? And when they talk about the enemy, they're talking about God, right? So he'll say, he's safely in our Father's house. That's a bad thing, right? That means he's in hell, okay? And so now, I'll give you this demon, this younger demon was assigned this person, okay? And this person was having some, conversion thoughts and things like that. And so now we'll pick it up from there. Dramatic music.
Wormwood!
Uncle!
What are you doing?
Well, I'm sitting here.
Where is your patient?
It's the person.
Inside.
Inside where?
That church.
Exactly. Your patient has become a Christian.
Oh, he has.
Yes, do not indulge the hope that you will escape the usual penalties. Indeed, in your better moments, I trust you would hardly even wish to do so.
Yes, Uncle. I'm...
All right, so what's basically happened is his patient, the person he's been assigned, has become a Christian, and so obviously the uncle is now pretty pissed off that the junior devil let him become a Christian, right? So he's like, where's your patient? He's like, he's in church. Notice that the demon is outside the church, right, waiting for him to come out, okay? So now they're going to discuss what to do about this predicament, right? Your patient is now a Christian.
No, that is... Oh, dear.
In the meantime, we must make the best of the situation. Hundreds of these adult converts have been reclaimed after a brief sojourn in the enemy's camp and are now back with us.
All right, so now he's telling him, let's calm down. We're going to make the most of this situation, right? That lots of these adult people get converted and they're back in our enemies. They went to the enemy's camp, but they're back with our Father now. Like they're back as devils, right?
Truly?
You are an imbecile. All the habits of the patient, both mental and bodily, are still in our favor. One of our great allies at present is the church itself.
Oh?
Okay, so now this is a criticism of the church itself, right? But yes and no, okay? And I want to make this distinction. It's a very important distinction because it's one that trips up a lot of people, especially youth, but adults as well. And I have many conversations with adults, and the things you're going to hear, you've probably heard your parents say, and other adults and other youth as well. So he's basically saying, don't get all upset. One of our biggest allies is the church itself, right? Which means what? The church sends people to hell all the time, right? Now, not the church itself, obviously, but how we interact as patients, right, as people with the church. So now he's going to show him how to use the physical structure of the church to the devil's advantage. Okay?
Not misunderstand me. I do not mean the church as we see her, spread out through all time and space, rooted in eternity, terrible as an army with banners.
All right, now you see what he just said? Not the church as we see her, the demons, spread out through time and space like an army with banners. You guys see that? So what they see when they hear the church is they see what? We have two pieces of the church, right? There's the struggling church. That's the part we're in, right? The pathetic part, right? And then there's the victorious church. So he's saying, not the church that we see, all right? Because we see the victorious church spread out like an army through time and space, right? And one of the things we know about the church is what? That it's eternal, right? Because even in the creed, you notice in the creed, we say some weird things, right? We'll say, we believe in one God, God the Father, the Pantocrator. So we believe in the Father. We believe in his only begotten Son, light of light, true God of true God, right? So we believe in the Son. Yes, we believe in the Holy Spirit, the Lord, the giver of life. So we believe in the Holy Spirit. And then what's the last thing we say in the end of the creed? And in one holy Catholic and apostolic church. So we actually say in the creed, we believe in the church. Well, think about that statement. What's there to believe in? Like, if I was to tell you, do you believe this is a church? Do you have to believe me? No, look around. It's a church. Right? It's got an altar. It's got pews. It's got an abuna. It's got people. It's a church, right? I can touch it. There's a chair. There's a pew. There's an altar. Right? There's nothing to believe in. Right? So when we say in the creed, I believe in one holy Catholic apostolic church, what are we talking about? When St. Paul talks about belief, he talks about what? Evidence of things not seen. Just grab a chair and bring it over. But bring it close to the speaker so you can hear. Right? So when St. Paul talks about the church, he talks about things not seen, which is exactly what this guy's saying. The demons are saying, not the church that we see. Right? So, So the church is bigger than what we see. Right? That's the real church. The part we see is what's called the struggling church, right? That's the very, very small part of the church. That's not the big part of the church. The big part is obviously the victorious church. Make sense? Right? So, okay, continue. So now he's going to say, use the church to your advantage, not the part we see, the big as an army with banners and victorious martyrs and saints and billions of people. Use the part he sees as the church and what he calls the church, even though it's not.
That, I confess, is a spectacle which makes our boldest tempters uneasy, but
I like that. That spectacle of the church makes our boldest tempters uneasy. Right? So you gotta, this is C.S. Lewis, right? This guy's no joke, right? This is the good stuff.
Fortunately, it is quite invisible to these humans. All your patient sees is the half-finished sham Gothic building. And when he goes inside, he's...
All right, so he says, luckily they don't see what we see. All your patient sees is the sham, half-finished Gothic building. All your patient sees is the building. They don't see the church, right? Because this isn't the church. This is a building. Right? And so I even don't like to say, oh yeah, I'm going to church. I say, I'm going to the church building. Or we're building a new church. We're building a new church building. Right? Because the church isn't this. This is concrete and wood. Right? In fact, when you look at icons like this, right, one of the things we call icons are windows into eternity. It's the name of a book, as a matter of fact, right? Windows into eternity. And so what an icon becomes is a window into something bigger. Right? And so one of the points of like the chapel like this is to try and depict reality. Right? We want you to see with these very limited eyes what can't be seen. We want you to see the invisible. We want you to see the church that the demons see. Right? The one that's armies and thousands of people and people holding banners that's billions strong. Right? And so the church tries to do something like this to get you to see beyond the building, right?
He sees the local grocer with a rather oily expression on his face.
All right, so he said when he goes in, let him see the building, let him see the local grocer with the oily expression on his face. I don't even know what an oily expression is, right? But let him see the guy who, works at the grocery store next to him.
Bustling up to offer him one shiny little prayer book containing a liturgy which neither of them understands, and one shabby little hymn book containing a number of religious lyrics, mostly bad and in very small print. And when he gets to his pew and looks around him, he sees just that selection of his neighbors who, until now, he has avoided. You want to lean pretty heavily on those neighbors.
All right, so there it is. Get him to see what? The building. Get him to see the people. that up until now he didn't really want to talk to. Because now remember, this guy just converted to Christianity. So now he's walking into a church. So now he's seeing a bunch of people. And he's like, oh, this guy walks up here, here's a liturgy book, here's a prayer book. Right? And it's cute. He says, a liturgy book that neither one of them understand. Right? And here's a little hymn book, and here's a little this book. Right? There's a little agbeya. And get him to focus not on the icons and the walls and the saints and the real church. Get him to focus on the people inside the church. Get him to look at the building. Okay? So this is the attack of the demons. It's a very good one, right? Because as soon as we can reduce the church, which as the demons say is this infinite army, down to the abuna and the deacon and the guy next to me and the tant and uncle who did some dumb thing, well, now it's a win, right? Now and people say that, like, I'm not going to that church. Some guy said to me there, really? So that's what you're going to do? You're going to reduce Jesus to the idiot who said something to you? That's what you're going to reduce everything down to? And you're not going to... Christ didn't die on the cross for you and his blood wasn't spilled for you because some guy in church said, you should take your shoes off here, right? See what he did? He reduced something very big to something very small.
Make his mind flit to and fro between an expression like the body of Christ and the actual faces in the next pew. It matters very little, of course, what kind of people that next pew really contains. You may know one of them to be a great warrior on the enemy's side. No matter. Your patient, thanks to our Father below, is a fool. Provided that any of those neighbors sings out of tune or have boots that squeak or double chins or odd clothes.
I love it, right? Any of those people sings out of tune, boots that squeak, has a double chin or odd clothes. That's all you need. And he said it doesn't matter that those people are actually warriors for the enemy, which means what? They're very good Christians. Don't let him see that they're very good Christians. Let him see a double chin and go, these people are gross. Look at his weird clothes. Can you please not squeak your boots, right? And these are the things we notice, right? These are the big important things, right? How much Orban did I get today, right? How much? These are the big issues that we grapple with, right? As Coptic Orthodox, as Orthodox Christians, right? And so that's the trick, right? Don't let him see God. Let him see the people, and not even the real people. Let him assume something about the people. Let him see the worst part of the people. All right, that guy's got a funny haircut. She's whatever. Her shoes are too whatever. His pants are too whatever, right? These are the things you focus on.
The patient will quite easily believe that their religion must therefore be somehow ridiculous.
All right, there it is, right? So if I can get you to think people are ridiculous, and of course all people are ridiculous, if I can get you to think the people in the church are ridiculous, then I'm going to get you to think the religion is ridiculous. And there it is, right? And of course, the obvious thing that we all realize is people are ridiculous no matter where you go, right? You can be a Hindu, a Muslim, a Christian, a Buddhist, whatever, right? People are ridiculous everywhere, okay? But if I can make you intolerant to the ridiculousness of the group here, then I'm going to be like, oh, this religion is bunk, right? Coptic Orthodox Church is stupid. Orthodox Christianity is, stupid, right? Why? Well, you see that guy over there? Look at this guy stinks. This guy can't even sing. So Christianity is stupid because that guy can't sing? Really? Did you just say that out loud? But that's where Satan takes us. That makes sense?
Ridiculous.
Yes. At his present stage, you see, he has an idea of Christians in his mind, which he supposes to be spiritual, but which in fact is largely pictorial and completely fabricated based upon a false image.
There it is, right? So he's saying he has in his mind an image of Christians, right, that he thinks is spiritual. What does that mean? He thinks people are better than they are, right? He thinks, I'm going to come to this church and I'm going to meet these amazing people. I'm going to meet Christians. I'm going to meet people who love God. I'm going to meet people who say the right thing, who act the right way, right? And then you come to church, you go to a youth meeting, and you realize, oh, no, none of those people are here, right? These people are worse than people at school. So what he's done is he's telling you deceive him, and he's expecting holy people, right? And in fact, what he's expecting couldn't be further from the truth.
Never let him ask what he expected them to look like, or if that expectation was unrealistic. Keep everything hazy in his mind now, and you will have all eternity wherein to amuse yourself by producing in him the peculiar kind of clarity which hell affords.
It's funny, but like he's saying, if you can keep him vague and hazy, then you'll have all of eternity for him to be clear, and the only kind of clarity that hell gives you, right? Because you get a lot of clarity when you're in pain. Right, so, and you notice how when something hurts, you're all of a sudden very clear. Like, whatever you were thinking about, you're not thinking about. You're thinking about one thing, pain, right? So, that's just kind of his way of saying, if you can keep him vague and hazy, then you can have fun with him later.
Right, so I shouldn't stop him from going to church?
No. You must work hard on the disappointment or anticlimax, which is certainly coming to the patient during his first few weeks as a churchgoer.
All right, so this is an important concept, right? Satan prevents us from coming to church if he can. But once he can't, there's no point in fighting it, right? So he's saying, no, don't try to stop him from going to church all the time, especially in the beginning when someone is newly converted and very excited. Don't try to stop him from coming to church. Make him disappointed when he does come to church, right? Focus on that part of it. Make church a disappointment for him.
Enemy allows this disappointment to occur on the threshold of every human endeavor. It occurs when lovers have got married and begin the real task of learning to live together.
Right, so again, he's saying this disappointment the enemy allows. Who's the enemy? God, right? As part of the process of becoming a Christian, right? And he gives an example. He says it's like the disappointment two lovers have when they get married and have to live together. And like, oh, you're a slob. Oh, you're selfish. Oh, you're this. Oh, you're that, right? So you go from this idealistic, we're going to be married, it's going to be great, to, oh my God, this is disgusting and I don't like this person and I can't live like this, right? There's disappointment. All of you will be disappointed when you get married. That's just how this is going to happen, okay? Just letting you know now. Not you, though, but the others for sure, right? So, and that's normal, right? And that disappointment is actually very important, right? Because the disappointment is the part we work through, right? If there's no disappointment, there's nothing to work through, right? If it's all just, rainbows and butterflies, right, and unicorns, then it's not real. It's rainbows and unicorns, which aren't real. Rainbows are.
In every department of life, it marks the transition from dreaming aspiration to laborious doing.
All right, so this is it. In every aspect of life, it moves from dreaming to laborious, right? From the idealistic to the labor of doing, right? And it's kind of like, people can say, look, I love God, but these people, I just don't love these people. And this is the labor, right? This is the work, right? I come to church and I find a bunch of people, most of whom aren't lovable. And now the work comes in, right? In the beginning, I can say, oh, I love everybody and I'm a Christian and they love me and we're a community of believers and we all sing Kumbaya and we all hold hands and they're going to support me and love me. And then the real world hits me and it ain't anything like that, right? And that's the work that we have to put in, right? Habibi, welcome home.
The enemy takes this risk because he has a curious fantasy of making all these disgusting little human vermin into what he calls his free lovers.
All right, so this is really good. The enemy, sorry, I keep stopping, I know. The enemy takes this risk of disappointment because he wants to convert these humans, and he says humans very ugly. If you remember from 2 weeks ago, some of you weren't here, most of you weren't here, we talked about how one of the reasons the fathers say Satan fell was because of this plan to make people and to make them in the image and likeness of God, right? And have this, he called them amphibious creatures, half spirit, half human being, these animals, right? And so what he says is, the enemy takes the risk of disappointment. He lets you be disappointed because he wants you to be, and he's going to say it here, a free lover, not not a bound lover. Here, let me enter my passcode, seriously. Okay. I'm going to rewind it.
Servants together. In every department of life, it marks the transition from dreaming aspiration to laborious doing. The enemy takes this risk because he has a curious fantasy of making all these disgusting little human vermin into what he calls his free lovers and servants. Sons is the word that he uses with his inveterate love of degrading the whole spiritual world by unnatural liaisons with the two-legged animals.
That's so well written. I mean, I don't know if you guys can appreciate how well written that is. That's just so well written, right? I want you to hear it one more time, sorry. Right? He said the word sons, and he's like, this unnatural association with this two-legged vermin, and he degrades the whole spiritual world by allowing himself to become part of these people and letting these animals who are not spirits become sons. Right? So in there's a lot of theology of how Satan thinks, right? And why Satan fell.
Into what he calls his free lovers and servants. Sons is the word that he uses with his inveterate love of degrading the whole spiritual world by unnatural liaisons with the two-legged animals.
Bonkers, isn't it?
Bonkers, isn't it?
Desiring their freedom, he therefore refuses to carry them by their mere affections and habits to any of the goals which he sets before them. He leaves them to do it on their own.
Okay, now that's a very key part. Leave it to do it on their own. We talked a lot about this last time, right? About how when you raise a child and you try to teach them how to walk, you have to let them do it on their own, right? And if you help them too much, they never learn how to walk, right? If every time my kid, I pick him up and I say, no, not this month, next month I'll teach him how to walk, he'll never learn how to walk, right? And so out of his love for these two-legged animals, right, he wants them to do it on their own, right? He wants them to work through this process of disappointment, of struggle, of interacting with people who aren't very pleasant. And he doesn't want to just shield us from these experiences, right? Because that wouldn't be a good parent. A good parent doesn't just shield their kids from everything bad, right? I remember, I'll tell you guys a funny story. So during COVID, everyone kind of lost their mind, right? But a few parents decided, kids weren't in school and we wanted to socialize, right? And the kids aren't learning social skills. So a few moms, I thought it was a good idea, got together and they made little groups of kids and they would, the kids were safe, whatever, right? And you only interacted with these 5 kids, right? So they would do Zoom at someone's house, for example, okay? And the 5 kids would then, have recess together, play together, eat together, so that the kids are at least socializing with 4 other kids, right? So it seems like a good idea, okay? And so someone was telling me about this idea, and I was like, oh, that sounds a great idea. You socialize during COVID, that's nice, right? And then someone much smarter than I am said, what do you think she said? She goes, did you invite any bullies to the little 5 group? And she's like, no, we invited their friends. So he's like, oh, so 5 friends? So is that going to teach them any social skills or coping skills or life skills? I mean, think about how smart of a statement that was, right? So the moms got together and said, let's get your 4 best friends, and the 5 best friends who get along and talk and love each other can play together. And the other mom says, you should have brought a bully. You should have brought a kid no one likes. You should have brought a kid who's going to pick on them. You should have brought a kid who's difficult to deal with. Because if your stated goal is to teach social skills, you don't learn social skills by hanging out with a bunch of hand-picked friends who everybody likes and everybody gets along with. That's not how you learn social skills. You learn social skills by dealing with someone who's very difficult to deal with, someone who's mean. Make sense? So again, the mom was very perceptive and said, what are you trying to teach them? Right? Do you want them to work it out on their own, or do you want to just cherry pick and coddle them and hand pick their friends, and so that the life is easy. Because an easy life is not a good life. That's not what parents are supposed to do. Not make their kids' life easy. Right? Support them as they work through their challenges, but not make it easy.
And there lies our opportunity.
Well, perfect.
Not perfect, fool. Danger lies there as well. If they get through the initial dryness successfully, they may become much less dependent on emotion and therefore harder to tempt.
All right, so there it is. Right? He says, if they get through that initial dryness, right, the dryness of just kind of coming to church and not really having all these religious experiences, they're going to be much harder to tempt. So there's a risk, right? Remember, in the very beginning, he said, no, don't try to stop them from church. Teach them about disappointment in church. But now he's saying, there's a risk here, because if they get through that disappointment in church, they become much more mature, much more hardened Christians, right? And that's why when you talk to someone who's been in the church a long time, you say, this Abuna yelled at me, and it's like, yeah, get over it. Right? Or this servant isn't a very good servant. Yeah, I know. Lots of bad servants. And this person cheats on their taxes. Yeah, whatever. Right? Hardened Christians, if you will, seasoned Christians, experienced Christians, know other people are imperfect. Yeah. And when someone says, I can't believe I'm going to go to church with that person there, the response is, are there sinners at the church? That's rough. Is there a sinner there? Someone's not perfect there? That's a rough life you got there. That's a hard church. You should find a better church where there are no sinners, right? And so sometimes the perfect church for you, the right church for you isn't the perfect church, right? The right church for you may be the imperfect church, right? Where you are pushed to grow, right? Where there's the bully who's going to teach you coping skills. We have 1 minute and 30 seconds left. Almost done.
Of course, we must contact grunt throttle, bile squat, and foul belch.
Why?
Well, I have been operating on the assumption that the people in the next pew afford no rational ground for disappointment. Of course, if they do, if the patient knows that the woman with the absurd hat cheats at bridge, or the man with the squeaky boots is a miser and an extortioner, then your task is so much the easier.
All right, so he's saying this whole time we've been assuming that the people in the pews are good people. Right? And what you have to do is show them that they have squeaky boots, therefore they're bad people. But he's like, but imagine if the person with the squeaky boots was also a miser. Now your job is really easy, right? Now you just have to expose their actual sins, okay? Which of course is the case, right? Everyone in the church has something that they're not proud of, or they have some characteristic that that's not very good, right? And so he's basically saying, you have to just bring all this other stuff up. Once they know about the miser and the cheats at bridge, and does anyone here play bridge? Now it's going to be, your job will be much easier.
Excellent. Sorry, how is it easier?
Well, then all you have to do is to keep out of your patient's mind the question, if I, being what I am, can consider that I am in some sense a Christian, why should the different vices of those people in the next pew prove that their religion is hypocrisy?
Hypocrisy. Isn't that an obvious thought for him to have? How would I stop it from occurring to him?
Handle him properly, and it simply won't come into his head. Rational ground for disappointment.
So that was a packed statement. So I'll play it one more time.
Of course, if they do, if the patient knows that the woman with the absurd hat cheats at bridge, or the man with the squeaky boots is a miser and an extortioner, then your task is so much the easier.
Okay, so now the part we talked about, right? Your job is easy if these people know they're sinful. Okay, now he's going to say, of course, if your patient figures out this next thing, which is basically saying, well, okay, the person cheats at bridge and that person's a miser, but you're whatever, right? So you're just like them. You're a sinner too, okay? And and that's what he's about to say, right? That your patient can't figure out that he's also a sinner, okay? And then the little devil will say, well, isn't that an obvious thought? Like, of course he's going to realize he's a sinner, just like everyone else is a sinner. Like, duh, right? But he said, you have to keep it out of your patient's head, okay? So that's the solution. Keep it out of, because when you see someone else's sin, the first thought you have isn't, well, I'm a sinner too. That's not the first thought you have, right? What's the first thought you have? I can't believe that guy does that. I can't believe she does that. That person's such a hypocrite. That person's whatever, right? Who here thinks, well, I'm a sinner too? No one thinks that, right? You immediately judge the other person. That's what I do, right? So what he's basically, so the older Satan is telling the younger Satan, you just have to keep it out of his head. And that's what Satan very effectively does with us. So here it comes.
Excellent. Sorry, how is it easier?
Well, then all you have to do is to keep out of your patient's mind the question, if I, being what I am, can consider that I am in some sense a Christian, why should the different vices of those people in the next pew prove that their religion is hypocrisy?
All right, so he's saying, I'm a Christian, I have these vices, they have vices. Why does that prove hypocrisy? Do you see what I'm saying? Because we immediately say that, right? I saw Abuna do this, I saw a deacon do this, I saw a servant do this. See, hypocrisy. The church is hypocritical. Like, but you have vices too, and you're a Christian, aren't you? You're struggling too, right? And so he's like, you see the inconsistent logic, right? If I have a vice and I'm not a hypocrite, he has a vice, he is a hypocrite. How did that happen, right? And so now the devil's going to say, well, yeah, that's obvious. And so he's going to tell him.
Hypocrisy. Isn't that an obvious thought for him to have? How would I stop it from occurring to him?
Handle him properly and it simply won't come into his head.
Right.
He has not been anything like long enough with the enemy to have any real humility yet. All
right, so again, a key point. He hasn't been with the enemy long enough to have any humility yet, right? This is a very common thing that we see with young people, right? So sometimes a young person will have a revival, right? I go to retreat, and all of a sudden I'm at Tazbihah every other day, and I'm doing all the things, and I'm the deacon, and I'm the this, and I'm the that, I'm the Sunday school teacher, and it's great, right? But then this key part, he hasn't been with the enemy, God, long enough to have humility yet. So where does humility come from? Being with God, right? And this is very important because sometimes you'll hear a lesson on humility, okay? Like, you should be humble. And you're like, okay, how am I supposed to be humble? Well, tell yourself, be humble, right? So then you're like, okay, I got to be humble. I should be humble. I should be humble. I should be humble, right? And you're all smart enough to know that if you have to tell yourself to be humble, you're not humble. It doesn't work like that, right? And so the way true humility comes about is I have to be in the presence of what? Greatness, right? So I'm a professor, okay? So I think I'm pretty hot stuff, right? I'm pretty smart. I got a PhD. I learned a bunch of things, right? So I'm around a bunch of you guys. I'm like, yeah, I'm smarter than all you. I can outthink all of you. I know more stuff about accounting research than the rest of you, right? Now, if you want to be humble, you put me in a room with some of the legends, right, at some of these other schools, and you watch me put my head down and say, yeah, what do you guys think, right? So all of a sudden, in their presence, I'm humble. Whereas, when I'm standing in my classroom with a bunch of undergrads, I'm the man, all right? And I'm telling them, you don't know what I know, and I'm all that. Make sense? Right? So how do you make me humble? You can't tell me be humble around a bunch of undergrads. It's not going to work. I will not be humble around undergrads. But you put me in a room with professors much, much smarter than I am, and I will be very humble. Right? I'll put my head down. I'll say, well, I don't know. And I'll tap on my chest, right, just like we do, okay? So, as a Christian, how do I apply this, right? Well, if you're putting me in a room with a bunch of other people, I'm not going to be humble looking at you guys, right? I'm going to be like, I'm better than that guy, I'm better than him, I'm a better deacon than her and him and whatever, right? But if you put me in a room with God, well, I'm going to get real humble real fast, aren't I? Right? So, in the presence of God, that's humility. So humility only comes from a life with God. That's what teaches humility. You can't make yourself humble. You can't force it. Does that make sense?
He says even on his knees about his own sinfulness is all parrot talk.
Even when he's on his knees about his sinfulness, it's all parrot talk. This is the Satans talking to each other, right? When you're on your knees and you're talking about your sinfulness, it's parrot talk. It's like, Lord, forgive us our sins. Lord, forgive us our iniquities. Lord, forgive us our trespasses. Lord, visit sick your people, blah, 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 blah. Parrot talk. You just make the sounds that you've trained your throat to make, and there's no real remorse or humility.
At bottom, he still believes he has run up a very favorable credit balance in the enemy's ledger by allowing himself to be converted, and he thinks that he is showing great humility and condescension in going to church with these smug, commonplace neighbors at all.
All right, so this is really important for a lot of us, which is a lot of times we think we're better than the people at church, right? And this happens, forgive me, a lot at your age, right? All of a sudden you learn a couple hymns, you teach a couple lessons, you do a couple things. You're like, these uncles at church, they don't even go to Tisbeha. I do. These people don't even know the hymns. I do. These people don't even know anything about the Bible. I do. I know a bunch. My parents don't even fast. I do. Right? Very quickly, right, in his words, you run up a favorable balance in the ledger. Okay? And his word choices are very key here, right? We think God is a ledger. You know what's a ledger? It's debits and credits, 2 columns, and they add up, right? And when you start thinking of God as a ledger, favorable balance, have I done more good things and bad things, and I've run this up, then you don't know who God is, because that's not the way God operates. Okay? All right, we have 13 seconds left.
Keep him in that state of mind as long as you can.
I will do my best, Uncle.
You better had, Wormwood.
Okay, so that's it. Any questions, thoughts? Yes, sir.
I have a question that's a little bit off topic.
Tfaddal.
So when you were talking about parents not, a parent's job is not to make life easy for the child. How does that come into the topic of I guess spoiling your kids, or you're making money so you can give your kids a really good life? So how does that affect, you're supposed to let your kids struggle so they can get life lessons and stuff like that.
So what's the question?
Am I supposed to give them a comfortable life but still allow them to struggle, or is the point you don't have to make so much money to you don't have to spoil your kids, basically?
I mean, there's several factors. Okay, the first thing I'll talk from the parents' perspective since I'm old. The first thing is, and this is something a lot of you will go through the next few years, is you're focused on your success, right? Academic success, jobs, whatever it is you guys want to do with your lives. And at some point you say to yourself, well, I want to do it for my kids. Okay? I want to give them a good life. I want to be supportive for my husband or wife. Okay? And sometimes, although that's a good motivation, quote unquote, Satan can use that motivation against us, right? In fact, sometimes you're just fooling yourself, right? You see a dad working 80 hours a week, just to make a lot of money, and then you're like, you should spend, time with your family. And he's like, well, why do you think I'm doing this? I'm doing this for my family. And you're like, are you though? Or are you just telling yourself that, right? And so we can easily fool ourselves into thinking, I'm doing all this for my family. Well, you know what your family really needs? They really need you around, actually. They don't need the extra money. Your kid doesn't need a new phone every other year, right? He doesn't need that car. He doesn't need this house. What he really needs is a dad, right? So now you're saying I'm doing it for my kids, but you're not giving them what they actually need, right? And so as a parent, right, it's very easy to think that what my kids need are things, right? And, we come from a third world country, right, where, food, water, and shelter are pretty big things, right? That's not a given. Here it's a given. Okay, you're going to have food, water, and shelter. I mean, the schools will give you food, right, if you're under a certain income, okay? But in Egypt, that's not, right? So that providing sense is very strong, and it's necessary at some level, right? But then I think we come here and we kind of adopt that same thing. But what I see is a lot of people who just want to make a ton of money, and I'm doing it for my kids, And then the question is that really what's good for your kids, right? I mean, I remember Bill Gates. One of the things that Bill Gates did that I thought was just amazing. Bill Gates is worth hundreds of billions of dollars. And he gave it all away and said, I'm going to leave my kid, what I think was like $5 million, which is still a whole heck of a lot of money, right? But he's like, I'm not going to leave my kid billions because that kid doesn't have a chance. I mean, if you got billions of dollars, you're going to go to college? You're going to study? No, I have billions of dollars. None of us would study. None of us would make anything out of our lives. It's not good for us to have billions of dollars. And in fact, we'd probably just be on drugs and messed up, So, what's good for the child isn't more. Sometimes you have to be smart as a parent, And, you see that in something as simple as food. More food isn't always good for the child, right? For a kid who's starving, it is. For a kid who's overweight, it isn't, right? So anyway, so there's like that balance. Am I answering the question? I don't know if I answered it or not. Good. Any other questions, comments? Do you guys like this format of the audiobook and stuff like that? C.S. Lewis is very insightful, right? But I mean, just kind of to summarize, right? Basically the idea is let's use the church against people, right? And the way we do that is you set expectations in one area, and then they're inevitably disappointed, right? When you actually see the people who are around you, none of them are all that great, none of them are all that smart, none of them are all that holy, none of them are anything, right? And then you incorrectly conclude, well, they're messed up, so maybe this whole religion thing is hypocrisy. When obviously the next logical step is, but you're messed up too. Does that mean your religion is hypocrisy? And you're like, well, no, it's not me, it's them, right? Which is, of course, a logical inconsistency, but we do it all the time. Right? And when we see someone else messing up, we immediately just judge them. We don't think to ourselves, well, I'm messed up too. We just repress that thought from our head, and we just judge the other person. So I can't believe she did that. I can't believe he did that. I can't believe it. Well, you do stuff like that all the time. And so Satan can use the visible church to make us doubt the invisible church. Right? I think that's it. Anything else? Questions, comments? Yes, sir.
I guess I came in kind of late, but for I guess there was a part where Satan talks about making humans, or God making humans his sons, but then he said something about tarnishing the spiritual world, or what exactly does that mean?
So the idea is Satan doesn't like the fact that God mixed spirit with human. With man. So he tarnished the spiritual world, which was perfect, by creating humans and by instilling in them the image and likeness of God and making them his sons. Right? And so one of the things we talked about before was that some of the fathers say that the reason Satan fell was because he was upset at God's plan of making humans. And that's sort of what C.S. Lewis is appealing to in here. You can see it we hate God because he did this with these humans, these vermin, these animals that he calls sons. They hate him for his love, which is the characteristic of Satan. And some people I know. It's a joke. Kind of. Any other questions? All right.